Parisi Palace, high above 3773 East Broadway. This is a live edition of the Jake Feinberg Show, coming on Power Talk. Please go to our website, powertalk.live. Download our free app to your smartphone so you can stream all of our live local programming, including Solomon on Blast, the Jim Parisi Show, and yours truly, the Jake Feinberg Show. We can't thank you enough for making us part of your day today. And a cat that I have been looking for some time. He's just continued to create new musical vocabulary on the bandstand, even up to today, trying to remind youngsters and to articulate to youngsters through melodic improvisation that really is about feel more so than facility and chops. And he had opportunities to cut records that sold in the millions, which for crossover records at the time was very rare. He's had a productive and prodigious career. He's also seen the Motor City of Detroit go from one of the most spectacular musical centers in the world to a place now that is essentially trying to rebuild from complete dissolution. Dennis Coffey, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
How are you doing, Jake?
It's good to hear your voice, brother. How you doing?
I'm doing good.
You know, we have a game on this program called Name That Voice. I want you to listen in and pay attention to the content, and then we'll come back and break it down.
Well, we were learning, but the thing is, we were learning more than we realized. When I was talking about you can get anything these days, I'm talking about music itself, the notation.
Right.
You can get any of that is online. That we used to have to, that was in books. But what I'm trying to say, growing up in Detroit, there weren't even the books. We had to transcribe the melodies and some of the solos ourselves. And in that process, you really learn and understand what's going on, because it takes you time to absorb it and digest what you're transcribing. So you get a theory lesson as you're doing it. You get a lesson in harmony and melody as you're doing this, and you also understand kind of what that musician was thinking about. But now, as you say, there's so much available that it's almost like they don't know what to choose. So that's another part of my mission. Our mission is to help them understand what is important in terms of the jazz repertoire.
You want to take a guess at who that is?
I'm not quite sure.
That is the legendary guitarist Kenny Burrell.
Oh, Kenny Burrell. Yeah, I've seen Kenny many times. Yeah, I just didn't recognize his voice talking.
Of course. Now, that was from my interview with him from March 13th, 2013. So, this is what I wanted you to talk about was the street learning that you had. I mean, he grew up with Pepper Adams, Elvin Jones, Tommy Flanagan. Barry Harris was 10 years older than him. Yusef Lateef was 10 years younger than him. I want you to paint the picture of your upbringing and ultimately how you learned to create your own sound.
Well, my mom told me I could name every song on the radio when I was 2. So I must have had an early interest in it, but I did my first record date and took 2 guitar solos and got paid for it at the age of 15. So that I started that way, and then what was happening at 16 in the metropolitan Detroit area, you had teen clubs every Friday night, and you had if you were a good band, you could do weddings and things every Saturday night. So when I was in high school, I was working 2 nights a week already doing teen clubs. And Kenny's right about you had to learn it because rock and roll was just starting. And the only way you could learn that stuff, because it was being created as we were learning it, no one could teach it to you. I mean, you'd ask a guitar teacher, what's Chuck Berry doing? The guy just, I have no idea. So you had to learn it by listening to the records. So that's how we learned the rock and roll stuff. And there were about 20 bands doing that. And so by the time we were old enough to work in the bars, we were already equipped with all the repertoire because we knew all the songs. So then we just transferred from that into the bar thing from the teen clubs. But when I aged out of the teen clubs, I volunteered for the draft, and I was in the 101st Airborne Division, and down at Fort Campbell, and Jimi Hendrix was in there when I was in there.
Are you kidding me?
No, he was in there the same time I was in there, and what happened was the guys in his unit hit his guitar and wouldn't give it back, so he was very frustrated. But I had a guy called Bob that was my rhythm guitar player in the 101st, and he got into a bar fight in Colorado and cut a guy up, so he had a choice of going to prison or joining the 101st Airborne Division. So I saw him knock a guy out for just taking cuts in front of us in the chow line, so even the airborne guys were afraid of this guy. They wouldn't think of trying to take our guitars and hide it.
Hold on, wait. What happened to Hendrix's guitar?
They hit it on him and wouldn't give it back. Apparently, eventually, they gave it back.
Oh, they were teasing it. Okay, so yeah. Let me be clear about something. Insofar as I want you to talk specifically to the audience about how, because really, when you were a kid coming up, the saxophone was the lead instrument, and the guitar was mainly a strumming instrument. It was like almost like a banjo. It was a rhythm instrument. It was a Freddie Green. You listen to Freddie Green, yes. People like that.
I'm well aware.
Right, obviously. So, how did the rhythm change in your ears when the saxophone went from a lead instrument went from the main lead instrument to, like you talked about with rock and roll, when the guitar started to become a melodic lead instrument?
Well, I would say guitar amplifiers. That was the key. You know, back when I was first playing, they didn't really have good guitar amplifiers, just small things, so even the piano player could drown me out. But once the first real heavy-duty amp I got was a Fender Bassman amp. It was a tube amp, and that thing was about 80 watts, and I could probably drown out a whole big band with that sucker. So that gave us the voice, because you couldn't ignore when we had those big tube amps going on, and suddenly, because the guitar guys and Elvis Presley, you know, Scotty Moore and those guys, and Chuck Berry and what they did, and B.B. King, the blues guys. So suddenly the guitar was certainly a voice to be reckoned with, and the horns couldn't drown us out anymore. We just turned the amp up.
Was there a color bar in Detroit? And what I mean by that is, you know, going back to Kenny Burrell, he's talking about his brothers. I mean, it was pretty integrated in the sense that you had Pepper Adams, you had Elvin, Tommy. I mean, these guys were playing at, like, you know, theater clubs on Monday night jam sessions. They'd just play wherever they could play. Whoever could get the gig would get the gig. What was the kind of band that you were, you know, I assume you were doing the same things. You were listening to records, you were playing them, you were transcribing them. There were no books. I mean,
I never transcribed anything. I'd do chord sheets, and I just learned them off the record.
I love that. Okay, that is the now. So let me ask you a question. Did you work with Gene Page a lot?
Yeah, I worked with Gene. I sure did. Fine arranger out in L.A. when I lived out there.
Because when I've interviewed David T. Walker, Wilton Felder, and Barry White, not Barry White, and Ed Green, and
yeah, I worked with all those guys in L.A.
I know you did, but what I'm saying is Gene Page was the arranger for Barry White, and most of the times he would just come in and give them chord changes, and then he'd tell Ed, like, this is the kind of feel I want on the drums for the rhythm, and then he would allow the cats to extrapolate in their own way on the tune. And can you talk about an early experience at Motown or anywhere? I mean, you were 15 when you'd cut these solos, you said, but when you had who you worked for, I mean, today's world, the musical paradigm is completely different, obviously, but you also have people like producers and who actually believe that they're also, they know better than the musicians. And you have issues now within people knowing their roles. And can you talk about early on the kind of freedom that you had in the studio as it related to sparse, you know, chord charts, not overly arranged, and allowing the musician to do what they are naturally gifted to do?
Most of the time, let's go with Motown, because that's probably, the Funk Brothers is the most famous rhythm section I played with on a daily basis. I was one of those guys. Okay, here's how the day worked. We'd get there on a session. A session was 3 hours. We would get there at 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning, and usually the only people in the studio would be the 11 Funk Brothers, and it would be the arranger and the producer. That was it. And so our job was they put a master rhythm chart in front of us, and the first job of the day was read the chart. Make sure you're reading the chart as written. And then if the arranger was happy that you were reading what he had on the paper, then if the producer wanted a little extra, you could suggest a few licks, or Eddie Willis and me could do a lot of fills that were on the offbeat that didn't get in the way of the singer. And you could do stuff like that, but that's kind of how we went. Our job was to record one song every hour with no mistakes, because if you made one mistake, they had to stop the tape. So that's what, and make it a hit. So you had to do a song you never heard before, a chart you never read before, and sit down and read the chart, play the song, give it a feel, and make it a hit with no mistakes. One song an hour. That's the big boy leagues right there.
I mean, Dennis Coffey, a major leaguer in the same vein as Kirk Gibson, any of the famous Detroit Tigers out there. I mean, so I just want to be clear. You did get a chance to sight read the charts. You had a chance to sort of do a cram session before you went live with that tune.
That's why. Yeah, see, that's why the Motown records sounded so tight, because we had a master rhythm chart of 3 stabs, so we could see all the parts on the charts. And we played off of that chart. We could see the piano parts. I could double bass lines with Jamerson because I could read in the bass clef, and you can see stuff like that. So that's why it was so tight, because we had a master rhythm chart, and it was all written. That's what made it tight.
One of the cats that gets overlooked, I actually think, I'm not going to claim that I don't watch TV. I don't really watch a lot of movies. I've done 4,000 primary source interviews. I'm going into my 4th decade as a human being, or human animal, but Kirk Lightsey was part of the Funk Brothers, wasn't he?
No. Kurt was a fine player, but Earl Van Dyke and Johnny Griffith.
Well, because Kirk was, in our interview, he talked about playing on. So you're saying that, how did you become a Funk Brother? Because Kirk was on a lot of those sessions.
Well, all I know is in about 67, 68, when I got over there, that was the rhythm section, period, every day. It was Johnny Griffith on organ and Earl Van Dyke on piano, Jamerson on bass. We had Pistol Allen and Uriel Jones on drums, Bongo Eddie on congas, Jack Ashford on tambourine, and one of the guys that never gets mentioned is Jack Brokenshaw, did all the vibes parts. And Jack was from Australia, and he used to be in the Australian Jazz Quintet.
I know. I've interviewed Bryce Rohde. I mean, rest in peace. The most badass Australian most badass quintet I've ever seen. And I've seen Brokenshaw. He was doing Ford commercials. I've seen him on records doing. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, he was doing. But he was also a funk brother every day. He was in the overdub room playing vibes.
Oh, that is so unbelievable. So. But you were a funk brother.
Yeah. The guitar section was usually the original guys. Before I got there was Robert White, Joe Messina, and Eddie Willis. And then when I came, there were 4 of us, so 3 out of the 4 got to do the session. And I could do the funk stuff. I could do the improvised fills like Eddie could, and then I could do backbeats. But then I brought all the effects to the party. The first wah-wah pedal on an R&B record was Cloud 9. Oh, and that won Motown their first Grammy.
Hold on, I want you to talk about your first pedal board. Who built it, and what was This is so important because I'm obsessed with this time period that basically you, in your heyday, where it was essentially taking away Motown. I'm talking more about some of your records resemble this, but it has more to do with playing kind of just, over one chord, but having jazz musicians playing over rock chords. So it was kind of simple music, but you had the ability for all these people to improvise over relatively simple changes. And it's the most intoxicating time in music to me. I mean, and I I just wanted you to talk about that first pedal board you had, and did you build it yourself, or did you have somebody build it for you?
I never had a real pedal board. I still don't. But I don't. Now I have a little container I put 3 pedals in. That's about it. But in the beginning, I had a Vox tone bender for fuzz, and I had a Crybaby wah-wah pedal for wah-wah. And then I had an Echoplex, which I used on those sessions, like a Ball of Confusion. You can hear me through a fuzz with an Echoplex. Those were my 3 pedals, or my, but they didn't come on a board. You just set them up. And right now, of course, I've got a little case, and I've got 3 Boss pedals I put in there. It's usually a tuner, maybe a delay, and sometimes a fuzz, or sometimes maybe I've got a 1963 Fender amp model pedal that sounds like that. I use that kind of stuff. I never use more than 3 pedals in a box, and then I use the wah-wah on the side if I need it.
When did you break out the wah-wah pedal? What year was it?
It was probably, I think, Cloud 9 was probably 68.
Yep.
That was the first time I used to put the wah-wah pedal on the front of that.
Because what's interesting is I've done a bunch of interviews with Randy Brecker and cats that were in the band Dreams, and he was throwing a wah-wah pedal on his trumpet, but that was 72. I mean, did you wind up reconnecting with Jimmy after the Air Force, or after the
Jimi Hendrix?
Yeah.
I never really ran into him because we were in the 101st Airborne Division, had different companies, and it was a massive complex, still is down there at Fort Campbell.
Well, I guess what I meant to say was once you got discharged, because you guys were doing kind of parallel stuff, weren't you?
Yeah, but I never ran into him. That's the answer to the question, because I was in Detroit doing sessions, and he was in London, and he was all over the place.
Talking to Dennis Coffey here on the Jake Feinberg Show, and this is just something I wanted to ask you about because a lot of you talk to enough cats, and people like James Jamerson would get very angry. By all accounts, he'd be at a session, and not necessarily with the Funk Brothers, but maybe once he moved out to L.A., and people would be hemming and hawing about, where's the one, the downbeat, where's the one, and he'd yell out, any note can be the one. And I wanted to get Dennis Coffey's concept of the idea that you're playing in a live setting the way you might have done back in the day, or even today, when the collective group goes off into an improvisational jam and you lose the one, and you're all able to come back in on the one, and that is sort of the magic of music. And I kind of wanted to get your concept of any note can be the one.
No. If you talk about one, you're talking about in every beat, there's usually 4 beats in each measure, and the one is the one. If you're talking about the primary accent beat, it could be any beat. So that's the difference. But we're reading a chart. None of us ever got lost in the music. We always knew where we were at, and it was never a jam. I mean, we'd get a chance to do, Norman Whitfield would give me a chance to make up intros, like Just My Imagination. I just made that up on the spot, and Eddie did a little answer thing. And at the Fade, on Cloud 9, he gave me a chance to do a solo. But at Motown, I mean, that's why they call it the Hit Factory. There were no jams in there by the time I got there. They had great arrangers, and they had the producer, and we had to get one song done an hour. You couldn't be jamming. You wouldn't even get the song.
I sort of meant in a live band context, not so much in the studio. I meant the idea of, for lack of a better word, for lack of a better band, a band like, the Grateful Dead that would, or even Parliament Funkadelic, where they would go off and you would lose the one, and then you would all be...
Yeah, and that kind of thing. I did I Want to Testify with George Clinton, and I played some cuts on that first album of the Parliament Funkadelic. It's just like with the band I have every Tuesday night, which I've been at Northern Lights for 10 years. All I do is give the guys a chord sheet, and then we play the melody, and we solo different. Every time we take a solo, it's different. And at the end of everybody's solos, I kind of cue them, and we come back and play the melody, and that's how we do it.
And I guess you'd never play the same song once.
I never play it the same way.
I love. Yeah.
Yeah. I wouldn't do that. I have a short attention span. Most session guys have to learn a new song every hour. So there's no way I would say, okay, I'm going to play this song just like the record. That'd bore me to death. So I don't tell my guys what to play. Here's the chord sheet. That's the basic structure. I don't write out charts for them. I said, these are the chords. I'm going to count this sucker off, and we're off. So read the chord sheet, and I hire guys good enough that know you have to work together because it's the same guys in the band working every Tuesday night. And then I got different singers I bring in. So I got an organ trio, bring in different singers at the Northern Lights Lounge. I've been there 10 years.
Well, I'm going to come see you very soon and do some Facebook Live. I cannot wait to come hang. It's just, part of the amazing thing, we came in with a track called Chicano that is your track from 1974. I got the flute solo on there, but I also got this wah-wah thing going on. I think Jamerson was on bass. And I'm just wondering, going back to Motown, one of the things that I noticed today in recording is just the idea that, for instance, you could mic every drum on a drum kit now.
Right, sure.
Can you talk about at Motown the subtleties of the producer, how they mic the room, specifically allowing some leakage? Some leakage is really quite good. And were you as a guitar player always mic'd, or did you have to really?
Never.
So you had to figure out you basically did not have the electronic output abilities. You still needed to create that volume. I'd like you to talk about how you did that.
Here's what we did at Motown. Okay, Jamerson, the bass player, and all the guitar players plugged into a big direct box above a speaker cabinet against the wall. So we were all direct, straight to tape, period. Now, if I used some effects, then it went from my guitar to my effects straight into the board. So what you're hearing from somebody like Jamerson, that was straight ahead what he played, he didn't use effects and stuff, is that's just him and his bass. That's what you hear. And same thing if I wasn't using effects or stuff, or we were all plugged into this monitor speaker, which that volume was controlled by the studio. You could only get it so high. And I used to play, the speaker was right behind me, and then I would I'd have a headset on, and I'd take a little bit of the headset off of one of my ears so I could hear the speaker behind me, and then the other headset I could hear the tracks as they were going on tape. I could hear everybody doing that.
Okay, so this is important with, for instance, like when David Clayton Thomas left Blood, Sweat, and Tears and they became a strictly instrumental band, they would go into RCA or places like that, and everybody would get warmed up so that they'd play a tune a couple of times to get it live ready, and then they would cut the individual tracks. I was sort of living in this sort of fantasy world where they cut everybody at one time, but no, once they got live ready, they'd cut the rhythm tracks, then they'd cut the horns, and then they'd cut the vocals or something along those lines.
Yes. The reason for that is you've got to focus on the rhythm section and make sure it's right, and make sure the feel's there and everybody's playing their parts. That's a job in itself right there. Then when that rhythm section, the Funk Brothers, we laid down the foundation for nothing came to life at Motown. Before that, you had the writers and arrangers, and everybody was writing on paper. Those songs never came to life until we put our hands on them and started playing the music. Then everything was dubbed on top of the rhythm section in different sessions. But just like on a vocal session, I mean, back in the day maybe they did some of that stuff, but you need the time for the singers to really, do their thing. Sometimes they can do it faster or not, but you need to focus on each element to make sure you get it right.
So it was essentially piano, bass, drums, or also maybe a rhythm guitar would be laid down first?
No. The rhythm section in Motown were 11 guys. So what you had on every session is you had 2 drummers, and they were mic'd with overheads, and they had the kick drum mic'd and those kind of things. Then you had usually 3 guitars and a bass all direct, and then you had congas, Bongo Eddie and Jack Ashford on tambourine were usually standing right pretty much in front of me. and Earl Van Dyke was playing that big piano, grand piano, like small grand piano, in the one corner, and then Johnny Griffith was on an organ across the room, and then in the overdub room was Jack Brokenshaw on vibes. So that was the nucleus of what we had. And with the drummers, ever since Cloud 9, one drummer was playing the hi-hat and the cymbal stuff, and the other drummer was playing the kick and the snare.
You make it sound so easy. I mean, that was the way it was when you arrived in 67, 68, or do you feel like that's always the way it was?
That's always the way it was. And then, but what you got, which you don't have now, you have 11 guys playing together,
right,
reading the same arrangement, and they're playing off of each other. That's how you get the feel. Nowadays, you got a click track, and you throw in a automated thing doing this and thing doing that. You don't have that interaction of all the musicians playing together at the same time, which is what we had at Motown.
I wanted to read you this quote from my interview with a guy you probably know, George Bohannon.
Yeah, I remember George, trombone player. Yeah.
Right. He said I was on staff at Motown for 7 years playing trombone for the likes of Tammy Terrell, Marvin Gaye, The Miracles, Little Stevie Wonder. When he showed up, one thing I liked about anybody who was writing anything at all was that they would write from their guitar in odd keys for the trombone, E, A, B, D, G. Well, we didn't play those keys in bebop. We stayed on the F or the B flat. Having that experience with Motown helped me when I had to stretch out with guys like Charles Lloyd who liked to write in E and A. It was no problem. My feeling was that as long as I had my horn in my hand, I was learning something. Can you just talk about, if you can, I mean, because like he goes on to talk about the guys that Motown, Marvin and Smokey, I mean, they were writing emotional tunes, love songs, and you listen to a lot of your records, and they're not necessarily always, they don't have a lot of vocals, but they're emotive tunes. How much did those songs or their ability to craft songs rub off on your own writing?
The only thing it wasn't, I started in a top 40 band when I was a teenager, so, you learned that way. And then working every day at Motown, I used to do a double session every day at Motown. I was in a producer's workshop for 2.5 hours. I was down at Muscle Shoals at Wilson Pickett, or I was at United Sound with the Dramatics, who recorded for Stax. So that's just the kind of stuff we did, So you had a lot of varied experience, but I believe you can get better training on hit records and what makes them from a rhythm section point of view, certainly, than Motown.
When so many of the cats, like, I'm just curious about, like, Union Scale, were you, I've done several interviews with Emil Richards, the great percussionist, and he talked about how at the beginning when he moved out to Los Angeles, you'd get a double, meaning like if you played clarinet or saxophone on the same album, you'd get, double scale and any horn after that. But with percussion, when he moved out there in 59, it was only traps and mallets. It didn't include any hand percussion or vibes or
he had I used him out in L.A. when I lived out there. He had a whole warehouse full of percussion.
He was, but my idea, essentially if you were playing, I don't know, I mean, if you had to play banjo or if you had to play 12-string or sitar or, I mean, could you talk about how the Union double scale worked in Detroit?
In Detroit, we didn't have that so much. When I started working out in L.A., Motown paid me Union scale and a half for every session I did out there. They did that as, I guess they valued what I was doing out there. And that came into play one time when they called me up, Ben Barrett, the contractor in L.A., and he said, we're doing a show with the Jackson 5 tonight, and that included Janet and Michael. And I says, well, when do we rehearse? And he says, well, the guitar player left at the rehearsal, so you don't get a rehearsal. And I says, that does not sound like a good deal for me. And he says, well, we're paying you scale and a half, and we want you, period. So I had to do it. So it was interesting, but we got through it.
Well, let's go a little bit deeper on this. How were you paid in Detroit?
Detroit, I was a paid scale on this stuff, but you have to realize Mike Theodore and I were also staff producers for Sussex, and we had our own sessions running. And then usually you have a leader on a session that gets double scale. It's usually the contractor, but we were contracting our own sessions, so we would alternate who got to be the leader and stuff, things like that. I've been a member of the musicians union for almost 50 years now. It's a long time.
Let me ask, I mean, as far as the Black Cats are concerned, let me read you this quote, because I really want you to, and if you can be as honest as you can about it.
Sure.
This is from Don Randy, a cat you probably worked with.
I never worked with him, but I saw him play at the Baked Potato out in L.A., I think.
Oh, yeah, he owned that place. He said, this is after they moved to L.A., okay? So this is just for the record. Yeah. He goes, Barry Gordy heard some of the tracks we were doing for Phil Spector. He sent out one of his big-name acts for a recording date. On this date, I was hired by H.B. Barnum to be the piano player. Earl Palmer was on drums, and James Jamerson was on bass. When we finished the date, this guy opens up a briefcase, and it's loaded with cash, and he starts paying the musicians. Randy said, "What are you doing?" He said, "This is how we do it in the joint." I said, "You can't do that no more. You need to have a union contract." All of a sudden, these two big black arms come around me and hug me. It's James Jamerson, and he's saying, "Thank you, thank you, thank you."
Yeah, James was my best friend at Motown. He's the one that got me over there, where he called me up one day, and then he introduced me to Hank Cosby, who was the contractor and Stevie Wonder's producer. And he says, and they said they're doing this producer's workshop, and they hired me 4 days a week to do that. So after a couple of months, so the producers could experiment, Norman Whitfield came in with a song called Cloud 9, and we were running down the arrangement, and I just happened to put a wah-wah pedal on the introduction, and Norman says, "That's it. That's what I want." In 2 weeks, I was playing it with the Temps, and then I was there all the time.
Can you talk about the producer's workshop? I mean, what was the, I mean, you were not insecure about giving away your tricks of the trade, and what were they?
Well, my thing was to just, each song, that was our job, to get the song done, read the chart, add some effects if it was needed, and go on to the next song. So that was kind of, and then I had my own albums out with Mike Theodore. And then I was playing with my own gigs at night, just like the Funk Brothers. Some of those guys were playing at the Chit Chat Club every night. I was playing with Lyman Woodard and Melvin Davis 4 nights a week at the Frolic Show Bar in Maurice.
Wait. I'm sorry. What was this? Was in Detroit? Was this in Detroit?
Yes.
So okay. Well, I got another name for you. I got another name that voice for you. I want you to take a listen to this, see if you can get this, and then we'll come back and talk.
I'm really focusing in on the following year with Harry, only because there were so many different people from so many different parts of the world, and I learned so much. That was the biggest musical experience in my life. And it's a funny thing. I got big ears. When you say you got big ears, that means that you can really hear. And I could play the calypso. I had no problem playing what somebody told me to play. The problem that I had was I could not leave the Motown feel and the Motown pickups out of the music. That's the way I was taught how to play. But now, little did I know, I didn't know until years later that Harry really liked that. He really liked that Motown feel infused with the calypso and the reggae and the soca.
You want to take a guess at who that is?
He's talking about, Harry Nilsson?
No, he's talking about Harry Belafonte.
Harry Belafonte. Oh, okay. So was that King Harrison, maybe?
It's close. It's a guy I'm really hoping you still connect with. Is a guy named Kenneth Spider Webb.
Oh, Jesus, I haven't seen him. He was the guy who played on Cloud 9.
Okay, so first of all, Spider.
After that, he wasn't on the sessions anymore. They used Uriel and Pistol. I don't know what happened with that. But he was the one that came out with that fancy hi-hat thing on Cloud 9. And he played on the session, and then after that, I didn't see him over there anymore, so I wasn't sure what happened to him.
I think he got the gig with Harry Belafonte.
Oh, okay, there you go.
Chuck Rainey,
Well,
but
I haven't.
yeah, go ahead.
I haven't heard his voice in probably 30 or 40 years. That's why I didn't recognize him.
Well, let me. Did you reconnect with him in L.A. for any sessions?
I did not. I didn't see him on any sessions out there.
I cannot believe. So, I mean, he was actually a funk brother for a hot minute?
Yeah, but he wasn't part of the Funk Brothers were the ones that were there every day. That's how they got the name the Funk Brothers.
I mean, for people in Detroit is like in this huge rebuilding phase now. I mean, I'm not sure how long it will take. My mom is from Saginaw. Back in the 40s and 50s, that used to be one of the top 5 places to live. So is Detroit. Okay, but what he was talking about, the Motown feel, it's a feel. He said he had that. What he's talking about there, he had Cy Vuka in that band, Chuck Rainey.
I know Chuck. I did a few sessions with him out there.
Sure. No, what I'm saying is that he incorporated the Motown feel into this more Caribbean island kind of rhythm and music. And for people in 50 years who are going to listen to this, what in your mind is that Motown feel?
Well, that is, it's a regional sound that took off, and then Barry, what he did when he went to L.A., he was going to be a producer and a movie guy and everything. He lost that feel because everybody he used in L.A. were playing for everybody else. When Motown was here, other than me and Bob Babbitt, the Funk Brothers were under contract. They were not allowed to work for anybody else. So that's how he kept his sound pure, and it was a regional sound that went global out of Detroit. Then once Barry started recording out in L.A., and I was playing out there as part of Mo West out there, so I knew what was going on. But he didn't have the Funk Brothers anymore. He didn't have that. It would have been probably better if he had kept his recording here in Detroit and done his other business in L.A. He would have still had that regional sound that no one else could get, because the CBS and RCA wanted to build studios in Detroit, but they found out that Barry had the musicians under contract. They couldn't get them, so they never did.
Did those cats? I mean, they were under contract to only play for Motown in Detroit.
Yes.
Did they actually financially get ripped off by Barry Gordy?
Part of that. We were all driving we were all driving Cadillac Coupe de Villes, and I think Joe Messina was driving an Eldorado, so that ought to tell you something. So if you want to think the guys were ripped off, we were all driving Cadillacs.
Okay, so you cut out there for a second. So you're saying that in no way, shape, or form were they? Some people say, I mean, they died broke, or Jamerson died. You know, that to you being on the ground.
But see, at that point, what happened was when Barry left and went to L.A., the musicians were stuck here. I went to L.A. because Mike Theodore and I were on staff for Sussex Records. I already had a job there and a salary, and I already had a record deal and everything else, so it was okay for me to go out there. But for the guys here, they were pretty much just left here. You know, it was like a financial vacuum when Motown pulled up, and the poor guys went to a session, and there was a sign on the door. It was closed.
And just to be clear, I find it. I'm obsessed with regionalism of music, because there was a Detroit Motown sound. There was Chicago had Satterfield and Upchurch. They had their sound. New York had its own sound. Everybody had their own regional sound. Explain, especially rhythmically, what the Motown feel was.
Well, it's hard to analyze because it's reflective of the region. You know, Detroit, automotive plants, working man's town. You can hear live music right now any night of the week in Detroit, any kind of music you want, which means you got musicians that can play the music, you got audiences that show up to hear the music, and you got bar owners that hire people to play the music. That's the DNA of the city. It's always had music as part of their DNA, and Kenny Burrell knows that when he was doing jazz out of Detroit. He was part of that jazz thing that came out of here.
But you understand that if you don't have a name like Kenny Burrell or Dennis Coffey, that my generation, what we're facing, and I don't think it's any different in Detroit, is the idea that all of a sudden, because of a lot of variables, because music is unquantifiable as it relates to healing and how it helps people, we're looking now at a situation where music is seen as a musician's gift to the world, and because it can't be quantified, therefore you can't. They don't deserve to be paid for it. You can pay to play, or you can play for the door. What I'm saying.
We don't do it. The first time I heard that thing in New York, I says, "Are you crazy? I'm not paying for the door. To hell with you."
Right.
The Musicians Union does a good job of setting scale, and does a good job of pension funds and the contracts. And I'm a retired musician as far as because of my age, so I get money from the Musicians Pension Fund and stuff. So that's the group that really put the financial picture to it.
Folks, welcome back. Had a little bit of a delay there, but got a chance to reconnect with a legendary musician, Dennis Coffey. I wanted you to just talk a little bit about Bob Babbitt. There's some issues as it relates to the first record that the electric bass was recorded on in jazz was a Art Farmer record in 1953 with Monk Montgomery. And when did Babbitt's electric bass first get pressed on a record?
Probably. I'm thinking, I used to do a lot of Northern Soul sessions with Bob Babbitt in the early 60s. And I'm trying to think. Also, he was, I'm trying to think if he, I know I did, I'm trying to think where in the, I don't know which recording he was on with electric bass. I remember way back when we were playing teen clubs when he started on Upright, and he was one of the first guys here in town to get a Fender bass. And, so he was probably he probably got a Fender bass when he was 16, 17 maybe by then.
Were you you were playing out live with Babbitt and he was playing Upright?
Yeah, we were playing teen clubs. He worked with us once in a while, and then Babbitt was a member of the Royal Tones with me. That was in the early 60s.
What was that, a doo-wop group, or how would you describe that kind of group?
It started off being they had this record out called Poor Boy and Flamingo Express. I don't know if they had Babbitt on that record, but then later on we formed a band and did a song that I wrote. Trying to think of God, I can't even. It was a clarinet piece that our Faded Love, and we went to New York. I remember going to New York in the early '60s with Bob Babbitt playing bass, and I think we did Handyman with Del Shannon and a few of those things. That was probably. I know that was the. I think that was what was it? Handyman was the first. Can't think of the first gold record I played on was with Del Shannon. We cut in New York. I think Babbitt was on that record too. I'm trying to think of the name of that. There's so many now; they're starting to cloud up.
No, but did you know the Monk Montgomery story?
I did not.
Right.
I knew Wes. I used to hang out with Wes.
Can you talk about Wes? Because that cat used to come up to any musician with a guitar case and shake their hand. Can you tell me about your relationship with Wes Montgomery?
Wes Montgomery. All the guitar teachers in town were saying, "Hey, you got to go to the Drum Lounge over there in Dexter and hear this new guy, Wes Montgomery. He is just amazing." So we went down there, and it's funny because Wes, I got to talk to him on the breaks and stuff, and I used to go sit in front of him all the time. He was like an amazing player. I mean, he was certainly one of my. He's the one that got me interested in jazz, was Wes Montgomery.
Now, what was he doing? I mean, jazz-wise, it was just his phrasing, or what was
his phrasing? he was very lyrical. You know, he was to guitar, I thought, like Miles was to trumpet as far as his phrasing went. Plus, he had that octave thing going on. So he used to. I saw Wes grinding up on his guitar, and he ran out of frets. I couldn't believe it. He heard something in his head, man, and he was cranking it, and he ran right out of frets. He ran off the end of his guitar, man. It was wild.
Oh, my God. And he just kept playing through it?
Yeah, he just started over again. But I sat down with him and had a few beers with him from time to time, and he just was such a nice man, Wes was. He not only was a great guitarist, he was just a very nice man.
What was the name of the lounge? The Drum Lounge?
The Drone Lounge.
The Drone Lounge. You know, I mean, like a lot of times you go back to Coltrane with the famous quartet with Elvin and another Detroit guy. It was a Paul Chambers,
right.
and then McCoy. And you know, you hear about these sheets of sound that were being produced, and and a lot of people attribute it to Coltrane, but actually Elvin was the one that was providing these sheets of sound, basically playing through rhythms. And I wanted you to talk about a drummer that a cat that you were playing with, one of the cats that you loved to play with that really could play through rhythms. And I'm not talking about in the Motown studio. I'm talking about live.
You know what? If you heard a couple of the CDs I have out with Melvin Davis,
I have not heard those yet.
Amazing. He was doing some amazing stuff live at Maury Baker's, and that stuff. They're on CD that was done back then. And listen to what he was doing on drums, man. This guy was playing all kinds of polyrhythms way before. This was back in about 68, 67, 68.
All right, let's just break Is he still with us, by the way?
Yeah. And what Melvin does now, he does more singing now than he does. He still plays drums sometime, but right now I think he's toured. He's had some success touring Europe and stuff. But I see him every so often. Yeah, he's still around.
So what was? I mean, at the time he was doing stuff that was more exploratory than.
Absolutely. Yeah, you can hear it on the live at Maury Baker's. He was playing that stuff.
You're talking about Baker's Keyboard Lounge?
No, Maury Baker's was another place.
I've
got the new CD out coming out live at Baker's Keyboard, so they're probably going to get mixed up. But live at Maury Baker's was a CD I had out, and you can hear Melvin doing his thing on that.
What year? And that was from the late '60s. You put that out?
Yeah, 1968, 1970.
Oh my God! I mean, so what? I mean, at that point, what was it? A trio? Was it an organ? That was the other thing that I wanted.
Trio.
Yeah. So, who was playing B3?
That was Lyman Woodard.
So
he played left-handed bass and pedals at the same time. He was really cranking it out. You can hear him on those records.
Wait, what was his name? Lyman what?
Woodard.
Oh my God! I mean, you are going deep. I mean, this is the coffee bag right here, man. This is unbelievable.
Yeah.
So I mean, did you? What he was kicking pedals or playing
pedals, and he played left-handed bass at the same time, and really, I mean, when you heard that going on, it was really like the bass line was really happening.
You know, so I just missed this before, but I wanted you to talk about the idea that your name got out, and then you wound up going to Satellite and Muscle Shoals Records at certain points. Is that how you met Booker T?
I did not meet Booker T, but I'm on his last album.
Well, but you're on the veritable Sussex label, so I'm trying to figure out how that came to be.
Yeah, I didn't know Booker then. He was with the MGs, and then he was producing for Sussex. He produced. I'm trying to think of the singer that he had, Bill Withers.
Yeah, right.
So I talked to him because I played the president of the label that Booker was with. It wasn't that long ago. Actually brought the master tapes here to Detroit, and I played guitar on some of his stuff. The last thing he had out, and I talked to him on the phone once, but I never worked with him live.
Did you actually go though? There were sessions you did at Muscle Shoals and Stax.
I did. The Stax sessions I did were recorded here at United Sound because the guitar player Don Davis up here ended up being a producer with Stax down in Memphis, but he lived here and he was going back and forth. So they cut, like I played the Echoplex on the Rain by the Dramatics.
Wow.
And then I put a effects pedal on. What you see is what you get.
I love that, dude. And you're credited on the vinyl for that, right?
Yeah, and that was Stax. So when I went to the Stax Museum, but I was down playing in Memphis at the Gibson Guitar Factory when they had a hall there. I played at their hall there, and then I played outside at Memphis. They had I went through the Stax Museum, and it's just like when I go to the Motown Museum. You know, I played on so many Motown things, and I played on Stax things too.
And then Muscle Shoals. So, but these were overdubs. I want to be clear. You cut the rhythm tracks were already in place. You just overdubbed your part.
Yeah, but not on the Dramatics. We did it all at once at United Sound.
Wait, so the Dramatics actually came north to Detroit for that?
They live here. The Dramatics live here, but they were with Stax.
Stax Volt. So they lived there.
Yeah.
They lived there. Okay. So.
Yeah, but Don Davis recorded their stuff up here in Detroit.
Okay, so that was all done with a live. That was a live band. What about the Muscle Shoals stuff?
We did "Don't Knock My Love" down to Muscle Shoals for Atlantic.
You cut out there. Which sessions were they?
"Don't Knock My Love."
Oh, it was a Wilson Pickett.
Another one called "Fire and Water." I think we recorded down at Muscle Shoals.
And was that with Hawkins and Hood and those cats?
Yeah. Muscle Shoals Sound, yeah.
And it was after Fame Records. It was in Muscle
Yes.
It was in Muscle Shoals.
Yeah, and those guys used to be the guys on Fame, so they started their own studio after that.
Absolutely. No, it's just unbelievable. I mean, did you want? I mean, there were so many cats. I remember David Spinoza when I interviewed him. He talked about being called in by Arif Mardin and Dr. John. They were originally going to have a sax solo on Right Place, Wrong Time with the Meters,
Right.
but they saw him in the studio. He was on his way out to do a jingle, and they said, "Spinoza, come in here. We want a guitar solo." And he gets in there, and he plugs in, and he kind of like bends his first take, and he bends a note too far. He bends a chord, string too far, so it kind of he basically hit a clam, and he's like, okay, well, he looks at them and he goes, okay, let me do it again. I'll get it this time. And they look at me and they said, no, it's perfect. It's perfect.
The producer rules. I would never redo a guitar part if they liked it.
Well, no, what I'm saying is there some kind of corollary for Coffey as it relates to a time when you actually made a mistake, but like Miles said, there are no wrong notes, and it turned out to be gold.
Well, you know what? When I did Still Waters Run Deep by the Four Tops, and the damn groove sounded backwards throughout the whole session because of the way Frank Wilson put that groove, and I said, man, this don't feel right, and it was a big hit, so what do I know?
I love it. All right, well, I'm going to put this one more track in for you, and music track, and then we'll come.
Well, why it's on my mind? You know, Jerry Wexler hired me, and I brought Jack Ashford and guitar player Ray Minette down to Atlantic to record with Jackie Moore. And so while I was down there, Jerry Wexler wanted to hire me. He says, I want to hire you to be staff for Atlantic in Miami. And I says, well, what are we talking about? And he gave me a figure, and I said, you don't have enough money to hire me to come down here and work for you.
So it was an insulting offer, or it was just you were making so much?
No, he thought it was a good offer because he says, we'll give you a retainer of this much money. And that kind of retainer was what Elvis gave James Burton to be his guy.
Right.
And he says, we'll give you that kind of retainer, and you can do sessions for anybody you want. But Miami was not a hot session town back then anyways. But hell, I was up here. I was on staff for Sussex. I was doing production. We did Rodriguez, and we were doing all this stuff. And I was doing sessions for Holland, Dozier, and Holland, and sessions for Motown. There was no way that money was going to work for me.
Just to be clear, Sussex was a Detroit label?
No, that was Clarence Avant, and Sussex was out in L.A.
Okay, so because your first albums some of your early albums as a leader were on Sussex, but you had not yet moved.
Yeah.
You had not yet moved out to Los Angeles at that point.
Right. But we signed a deal with Clarence Avant. while we were living here. We were staff producers for Clarence.
That was you and Theodore.
Yes.
Is Theodore still around?
Yeah, he's here.
I got to talk to that cat immediately. This is this is unbelievable. But let's listen to this tune. So here, the other thing is this: you never tell me, because it's so fascinating. Did you go? Which sessions did you do, if ever, in New York?
I recorded in New York with the Royal Tones at Bell Sound. I recorded with Del Shannon at Bell Sound in New York.
And this was probably in the early '60s.
Yes. And we were working the Jersey Shore, me and Babbitt and the Royal Tones, and so it was not such a big deal to drive to New York to do those sessions and then go back to our gig.
Oh, what kind? I mean, was it a doo-wop group?
No, that was Del Shannon. He was like Runaway and all that stuff.
No, I'm talking about the band you were, the Royal Tones.
Oh, the Royal Tones started off as an instrumental group, and then me and Babbitt joined the group. So now the Royal Tones had a singer. We just did a couple of records with them, but we were working around town here as the Royal Tones, and then we did the Jersey Shore one summer as the Royal Tones.
Was there a it's interesting, George Wein, he identified Buddy Guy and guys like John Lee Hooker. They were like the popular Chitlin circuit cats, and he brought them into the early jazz festivals. Was there a Chitlin circuit to speak of? I asked Ted Nugent about this, and I also asked another cat I'm blanking on his name right now, part of Grand Funk Railroad. But was there a Chitlin circuit, R&B or jazz or blues circuit that was prevalent throughout the Midwest that you might have been on?
I didn't go on the road. I went out, did a few weekend gigs and stuff when Scorpio was a hit. But I did tour in 2011. I did the East Coast. I did Bonnaroo. I did South by Southwest, and I did Portland, and I did Seattle, and I did all that stuff. That was in 2011, the last time I went on the road. And I also did London and Paris twice.
But with the Royal Tones, for instance, I mean, like, Sammy Davis would be called an Uncle Tom. Sonny Charles, who's with the Checkmates, they were black groups performing for white audiences. And I'm just talking about like a Chitlin circuit. Where John Lee and T-Bone and those guys, was there a circuit that was running through Canada or even the Midwest like that?
Well, I saw T-Bone Walker. I saw him at the 20 Grand here. 20 Grand was where a lot of the, Bill Doggett was there and all these guys.
Right.
So they came through, and I played at the 20 Grand backing up. I think it was the Velvelettes and also Edwin Starr. I backed him up at the 20 Grand.
Oh.
So the 20 Grand was a serious club that a lot of these groups came through in Detroit. I didn't go on it full,
You didn't go on the, because George Clinton was talking about the 20 Grand. Martha Reeves was talking about the 20 Grand when I interviewed her. That was like so Edwin Starr. There's just so much. Let's just listen to this tune and we'll come back and talk about it.
All right, sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Music on the Jake Feinberg Show, brought to you by Abbott Taylor Jewelers, Craig Pretzinger of Allstate Insurance, Dr. Diggs and Butch Diggs of Diggs Dental, and we thank them for their support so we can play tunes like that for Dennis Coffey. What do you got for us, Dennis?
I know we did the Rodriguez album. Colfax, Mike Theodore, and I did the Rodriguez album. We discovered Rodriguez. We got Clarence Avant to sign Rodriguez, and we're in the movie with Rodriguez. If it wasn't for me and Mike, there would be no Rodriguez.
The album Coming from Reality, you did that too.
Yes.
That was you.
There's some cuts on there we did, and then he cut some of the other one. Some of the other album was cut overseas.
Did you?
We got about 3 cuts on there.
Did we play? Was that you playing lead though on that album, on that track?
You know what? It kind of sounded like it, but I'd have to check and see. You know what? They're starting to blur together now. There's so many.
I don't blame. I mean, this is called "Climb Up on My Music." But I mean, okay,
I know
so
I did. You could hear me on the one song.
Crucify Your Mind?
Yeah, that one, and there's another one that's got a fuzz tone guitar in it that I did. Something, I don't know.
What? I mean, I didn't see I've obviously got rave reviews, and you're in it. I don't, for better or for worse, I just don't watch TV a lot. And what were the intangibles about this cat? I mean, he kind of has this Jose Feliciano kind of look to him. But I mean, this guy was a funky cat. I mean, did you play live with him? I mean, when did you first be like, wow, this is like?
Yeah, when we first, I think his manager, Rainey Moore, called us because Rodriguez had a single deal with Harry Balk. He did 4 singles or something. And Harry Balk dropped him from Impact Records, I think it was. And so she said, well, Rodriguez doesn't have a deal. So she says, why don't you go hear him? So Rodriguez was playing at this place called the Sewer along the Detroit River downtown. So we go into this place, and it's all foggy, and the steamboats are going, and we look, and here's this guy singing, but he's facing the wall.
Oh, my God.
That was Rodriguez. And the guy was so shy when we first got him in the studio, because we knew he had something in his lyrics. We had to bring him in by himself and record him and his guitar for the first 4 songs and build a band around him. And then he got a little more comfortable for the rest of the Cofact album to have the band with him. But that was the whole Rodriguez.
Wait, you walk into the Sewer. Was he just playing solo acoustic?
Yeah, he's playing, but it was electric acoustic, so you could hear it. So I hear this guitar sound and everything, and here's Rodriguez playing with his face to the wall and his back to the audience. And I said, boy, that's really strange.
What was it? I mean, a lot of people would look back at Bob Dylan, when everybody was congregating in Washington Square Park, and they'd say, I don't really understand. some people clearly saw him as a future talent, but at the beginning, some people didn't. And what was it about was there a particular tune or some lyrics that really hooked you?
We recognized the talent, but the Cofact album was his thing. All those songs are just, and I co-wrote a couple songs with Gary Harvey on there too. But that whole album just had, I mean, we just knew there was something special about Rodriguez, the way he wrote lyrics and stuff, and then just his songs. So I opened up for him in London and Birmingham about 4 years ago.
What has he been up to, or what has he been doing, and what kind of frame of mind is he in now?
Well, you know what, he was doing a lot of touring, and he probably maybe still touring. So this friend of mine, Matthew Smith, was his guitar player, and he was his conductor for a couple of the tours. So he goes over to see Rodriguez, and Rodriguez he's got his house and whatever, he built like a fenced-in enclave there. So Matthew Smith sees the house over there, and he goes over there, and he forgot to lock the gate, so Matthew Smith walks in, and he's staring in the window at Rodriguez. And so Rodriguez let him in. So bizarre. And Rodriguez is still, we never really went to his house once, but mainly Rodriguez was kind of this guy that wandered around Wayne State, which, I got 2 degrees from Wayne, so I understand it. And he'd just be wandering around. He'd say, meet me on the corner over here. Me and Michael, we were doing the album, so we'd meet him on the corner in front of Wayne State all the time.
And just jam? And just jam?
No, we'd brought him in the studio, and he'd have, we didn't jam. He had structured songs.
And I just want to be clear, you let him play the tunes, and then you built a rhythm section around it?
He was too shy to play with a rhythm section, so we just recorded him by himself at Terra Sherma, and then we built the band around him and his acoustic guitar, and then after that he was a little more comfortable to work with a drummer and a bass player, and I played some of the guitar parts on that Cofact, and I played bass on one song too, I think.
Spider Webb is still in Detroit. Do you know that?
Oh, I haven't. I'm playing every Tuesday night. I mean, have come see me.
I want you guys to reconnect, man. There's no 2 cats out of Detroit that are more badass than you and Spider.
Well, yeah, so he's like I say, I've been playing the same place for 10 years. I'm not hard to find. I have no info on him, but yeah, he's a good guy.
Let me ask you before we go. How did you learn to? When did you pick up like at Universal? This is before you moved out to LA, but I mean, Hal Blaine would, they'd be doing like a soundtrack, and they'd need some kind of, Indian percussion. They'd rummage back at Universal Studios, and they'd just have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of types of instruments, and he could make drums that might sound like a tabla or even tablas themselves.
Okay.
When did you was there that kind of sort of warehouse in Detroit? I mean, when did you pick up the sitar, and how did you learn to play it, and what songs did you play it on?
You know what? I had a friend of mine that owned a music studio, and when the sitar first came out, a real sitar, I tried it on a few songs. I can't remember which ones, but then I bought a choral electric sitar and used that. But Joe Podorczyk had this music studio.
Joe Podorczyk was Nugent's mentor.
Absolutely, yeah. So Joe and I went to high school together. We played.
Are you serious?
Yeah, we played upright bass in the orchestra at Mackenzie High.
Oh my God, that's So wait, but I mean, were you able to just seamlessly play the sitar, or is it applicable to a guitar?
Well, the original sitar, those frets are movable, and it's a cultural thing in Indian music if you listen to it. And the bends are quarter tones and all kinds of stuff. So I said, I'm not going to even try and learn this instrument. So I gave it back to Joe and says, I'm not going to horse around with it. And then I bought an electric sitar, which I could play, because that was like a guitar.
And
an electric sitar.
And that was you bought that in Los Angeles?
No, I was living in Detroit. In fact, I think I played that on Band of Gold with Frida Payne.
Unbelievable. So, just for the record, you go out to L.A. You're working Mo West. You're probably in before the sun comes up, and Did you go to Dante's? What was the club where you could just let yourself go and like kind of like?
L.A. wasn't a jam town; it was a restaurant town, and a lot of the film people had to get up early. So I looked at L.A. as a restaurant town. There were very few clubs for live music and jams and stuff. So that's the one thing I didn't like about it. Here in Detroit, you can jam or you can go to clubs all over the place where they got live music. L.A. not so much. You would think, that it would be that way, but I found that here, not out there.
So, like, because, a lot of cats they were making so much dough in the studios, they would go out and play for free. But you never even had a band out there and didn't even play in a working band? No,
there wasn't any place to play out there, So that's why I looked around and, I was sniffing around, and there just wasn't a bar town. They were all restaurants, and there wasn't nothing happening after a certain time. You had a few clubs on the strip, but it wasn't a live music town, not like Detroit.
Dennis Coffey, I hope we can pick up and do part 2, man. I just had a ball with you today, man.
Well, again, I got a new CD coming out now, and I got my book out still, Guitars, Bars, and Motown Superstars. I got Live at Baker's Keyboard Lounge coming out, and I got another album coming out about the same time, March 1st, because I'm an artist now signed to Mac Avenue Records, Detroit Music Factory, and it's called Down by the River. And so I remember going out to the Detroit River in the middle of the winter with a suit on, freezing my...
Can you say that story again? You go out to the Detroit River freezing your ass off?
Yeah. I went to the Detroit River because I had to do a cover shot. And the name of my album coming out March 1st on Mac Avenue, the Music Factory, is called Down by the River. That's the name I came up with. So they said, well, okay, we need a picture of you down by the river. So they had a great photographer because he took the locations, like the Belle Isle Bridge, and it was just when the sun was going down. You could see the sun going down behind me, you know. So I can't wait to see what he came up with the cover. So, but it was cold as hell out there with me just with a suit coat on it, and I had a scarf on it. I was wandering up and down, and that wind coming off that river. Boy, it was a cold day for me.
Did you who was your favorite? If I, free association, I'm just going to give you a drummer's name and then you can give me one or two words to describe him. Pistol Allen.
Pistol was a great drummer, you know. Him and Uriel were on all those sessions, Uriel Jones. I mean, they could play drums together, and they were the backbone of that Motown thing. I did have a chance to do one session with Benny Benjamin, who was the original Motown drummer. But he had by then, he was ill and so forth, and he had passed away, so those two guys were doing it.
What was the session with Benny?
We did one late night set session with Benny Benjamin at Golden World, and it was like about 2 a.m. or something because, you know, he was on salary at Motown like the rest of them. So, you know, when they snuck out, it was always on some hell of a, I was doing a session one time on a Sunday morning, and Babbitt was on it, and Eddie, and there's a knock at the back door, 4 a.m. on a Sunday, and here comes Ralph Seltzer. He was kind of the attorney guy. He was kind of Barry's right-hand guy, and he flies in there, and he points at Eddie. He says, I see you. You're fine. Oh, Jamerson, you're fine. It was 4 a.m. on a Sunday morning. Who does that?
This One Night at Maury's looks insane, by the way. Insane.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that'll give you a Melvin's drum thing if you want to hear what he sounds like.
One more name for you is James Gadsden.
Gadsden, I did some sessions with him in L.A. And Ed Green was the other drummer I did some sessions with out there. It was good. Yeah, he did a good job. I think he was the one that did the Bill Withers stuff, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was the one that created some of those grooves that made those hits.
Sure. Yeah. He was a good drummer. He's a good guy.
Well, I'll get you a copy of this later today, and let's. My goal is to get to come up and see you in person this year, man.
Well, I'll tell you what, you'll enjoy yourself. We have a good time down there, and we always got people showing up, and they pay me, so I keep playing.
We'll blast it out to the world on new media too.
Good.
All right. Good to hear you, Dennis,
right.
And much love to you. I'll reach out to you later for Theodore's contact. I'd love to talk to Mike.
Yeah, I can give you his phone number now if you want it.
Yeah, just through the private mess, not over the airwaves.
Okay. All right. Well. Well, then why don't you call me back and I'll give it to you.
You got it, my man.
All right, good.
Talk to you soon, Dennis.
All right, okay.
Later. Bye. Another legend on the Jake Feinberg Show. Dennis Coffey, just a legendary cat and very humble cat. And we'll be back later today with Mark Levy on the Jake Feinberg Show.